first question this week comes from Erin Hall. She asks about the McKeever Shop property on Lakeside Drive, and also asks if there are any incentives that may be offered for historic building owners to be able to maintain their properties. So let me agree. The property is not well maintained at all. It's been owned by the same family for a number of years, and of course it hasn't been open for a number of years either. Our code enforcement officials do respond to properties like these, and if warranted, we post them as unsafe. The next step is condemnation and potential requiring of demolition of the property. It's certainly an option for this site, although we've heard that the site is about to change hands and ownership, and the new owner wants to restore the property. That clearly is the preference. The last thing we like to do is come into a neighborhood and demolish a structure, any structure. There are a great number of incentives for owners of historic properties to restore those sites. There are city, state, and federal incentives. All of them are really amazing, and you can stack those incentives to make them even better. They're fairly complex, so I'm not going to go into them today. But if you are interested in renovating a historic site or a potential historic site, reach out to our planning department for more information, and they can walk you through the steps. In the meantime, we'll continue to monitor that site, and if we have to proceed, we will. The next question was actually asked as a comment on last week's video. So thank you to Vince Tropy for putting this one in this section. From Kathleen Ruffino. First, a question about Skipper Road. I'll answer that one. And then second, about development standards that prevent drainage issues on new homes or old homes, and also about our review of existing drainage infrastructure. So I'm going to answer it again, those sort of in order. Prior to annexing the tract at the corner of Oak and Culture Street into the city, the developers of that tract actually had Skipper Road abandoned officially through the courts. There is a proper procedure for doing that through state law, and they went through that process before they came into the city. Skipper Road was never a city street, and if you do abandon a road, there's not payment due to the agency that had that road before. It is a portion to the neighboring property owner. So when Skipper was abandoned, the ownership of Skipper Road went to the property owners that surrounded it on both sides, which in this case was the developer. The city does frequently evaluate its stormwater and utility infrastructure, and we prioritize improvements where they're most needed. We recently completed the stormwater master plan for a portion of the city, and because of that, we received a $10 million grant for improvements. We will continue to update these plans and seek funding for major projects as we see fit. And we do, and I think I have addressed this before in earlier comments, about having development standards to prevent flooding in neighboring properties. Renee DeFalco asks about sidewalks and streets being maintained, especially when landscaping from someone's yard comes into the sidewalk and makes it narrow and hard to walk on. She also asked about maintaining the streets with curbing and whether street sweepers do that. So let me address these sort of in order. We do trim back vegetation from the sidewalk when necessary. However, it is a law that the owner of the property maintain their property and adjacent sidewalks and grass strips all the way to the curb and gutter of the road or the edge of pavement of the road. We do not have the capacity at the city to do this level of maintenance throughout the city, and we ask that our citizens do their part. We'll post the code section somewhere in here. The city does have a street sweeper, which has a regular schedule to clear debris and other things from the streets and the edge of curb. It helps maintain our stormwater system primarily because it keeps that debris and things to getting into the stormwater system and clogging the pipes and our ditches. But on the older streets that do not have curbing, the street sweeper cannot operate on those streets because it spins a brush and it flings debris into people's yards, potentially damaging property or people in the process. So we only do it on streets with curbing. If you notice clogged drains or ditches, please report that to our Public Works Department immediately so we can address it before it becomes an issue. Bob Gardner asks a question about Kingston Street and specifically about the reworking of Kingston Street to avoid right or left turns out of Kingston onto 4th Avenue. Kingston Street has an odd configuration, and part of the reason for this is the location of Kingston Presbyterian Church, which sits at the top of the ridge facing down toward the Waccamaw River. Kingston Street at one point would have ended at the church. As they built the road, they continued it around Kingston Presbyterian Church, preserving the church, which causes an unusual bend there at 3rd Avenue in Kingston. They continued that to 4th Avenue, and Kingston actually extends beyond 4th Avenue to 5th Avenue, where it goes behind the Carolina Theater and in front of the Mary Beatty House. Again, Kingston was built around historic structures in that area. Kingston may appear to end at 5th Avenue, but it actually continues on the other side of 6th Avenue south, and it ends there. It's an unusual configuration, and again, it was built around many historic buildings. It was not built necessarily to navigate to today's traffic flow. And fortunately, there are very few accidents on 4th Avenue in Kingston to warrant limiting the access to a right-in, right-out only. This road is really heavily used right now to circumvent traffic jams on Main Street and maneuver around the city. But as development continues in this area, it will be something that we have to carefully watch. And if we have to address access limitations in the future, we certainly can and will. Craig Roberts asked if City Council had any input into the moving of the Pepsi plant to North Myrtle Beach. No, they did not. We were made aware of the move after the fact. We're grateful that Pepsi did not leave Horry County, but we're certainly saddened that they've left the city, and we do hope that a new tenant can be found soon to be able to utilize the old plant. Susan Jones asked a question about the scooters. She said, we need ordinances for the scooters. People are now taking their personal scooters and driving them as fast as they can through the marina. They have no regard for the safety of pedestrians or dog walkers, and she was harassed by a family today on scooters. First of all, I want to point out that the scooters are not a city operation. They're a private company that has a franchise agreement with the city to be able to operate the scooters, but they are a for-profit venture by a completely independent company. And it's a pilot project approved by the city to see how it would go and identify issues with the scooters operation within the city. They're very popular, especially with our younger residents, and one concern that we've heard raised repeatedly in community meetings has been a lack of things for our teenagers to do. The scooters address that need directly, and they're very popular with those teenagers. And the scooters are not the problem that are being complained of in this question, and they're not what we've noted either. It's the people riding the scooters. Discourteous riders are not a symptom of the scooter, but of the person riding them. Scooters do not park themselves blocking sidewalks. That's a discourteous rider. And before we consider ending the franchise agreement for scooters, we need to ask those who are using them to do so in a responsible manner. So let this be my formal request to those who, like me, enjoy riding the scooters. Please be responsible for yourself and your group who is riding the scooters. Please park them in a manner that doesn't block a doorway or sidewalk. Please be a good citizen, because if you're not, the scooters will go away and I will have to say something like, this is why we can't have nice things. Please don't make the city be your dad. Bonnie Surface asks about the parking meters and doesn't want to lose the small town feel or charm of Conway. And she also asked a question about picnic tables at the Riverwalk. The parking meter issue has been discussed at City Council and for the time being has been put on hold. We're looking to more rigorously enforce the 2-hour parking limitations that are already in place rather than put in the parking meters. There was a lot of outcry from social media, honestly, about the meters, and so City Council heard that and they're looking at other avenues instead of the meters at this point. But parking meters also have nothing to do with small town charm. For decades, when Conway was a much, much smaller city, we had parking meters and they were charming. As for the picnic tables, we're not 100% sure what you're referring to, if it's the natural wood tables under the pavilions at the Riverfront Park. Painting those tables would create a perpetual maintenance issue for our already taxed staff. And if we just have people wipe down the table if they've made a mess, after they've made the mess, that would be the kind thing to do. And if you want to rewind this video 30 seconds for the scooter discussion, you get a more thorough answer of people policing themselves. There were a few other issues that weren't asked this week that I wanted to try to address. One, this was not posted to the Conway, South Carolina residents group, but it's been posted on a number of city posts. It's from Dave Frederick. He says we waste time and money on projects that aren't important to him, and asks for a sidewalk to get from Sedgefield subdivision to a grocery store. There are a lot of residents in Sedgefield that do pay city taxes, and he's concerned that there's not a good way to walk to Food Line. First of all, this comment was made on a city post about an event at Conway Elementary School. For those folks that like to post things like this, we'd ask that you message us directly or create a brand new post. You can do it in the residents group, that'd be fine, and we'll try to address it. But there is an appropriate place to put comments like this. Sedgefield subdivision has sidewalks that are internal to the subdivision for people to walk around, walk their dog, and get some exercise, and that's required by city regulations. However, Highway 701 is a federal highway built by the federal government. It's maintained and controlled by SCDOT. And there are some sidewalks on Highway 701, but they end at Tiger Road, which is near Food Line. Sedgefield is more than 3,000 feet from where the sidewalks on US 701 end. Installing sidewalks on any roadway is not just as simple as pouring concrete. Installing sidewalks on a federal highway not designed for them is incredibly expensive. 701 sheds water off of the road because of crowning, and water sheet flows off of the road to the sides into ditches or into swamps. Adding infrastructure like a sidewalk would impede the flow of water. So adding sidewalks is not as simple as simply adding sidewalks. You must also completely rework the drainage of the roadway system in order to add a sidewalk. For a road the size of 701, the pipe size needed to accommodate the water is both large and expensive. Our very rough estimate of cost for this type of sidewalk on this type of road is about $700 per linear foot, which would cost more than $2 million to run a sidewalk from Sedgefield subdivision to where the sidewalks end to get to Food Line. We do add sidewalks annually, and our council prioritizes these based on need and expense. There has to be a strong cost-benefit ratio in order for us to consider a new sidewalk. Connecting Sedgefield to Food Line is not high on that list. We do ask when people move to a new neighborhood in the city, we hope they exercise due diligence and look for homes near the services that they value the most. The final thing I'd like to address is this overwhelming sentiment from people that city staff or elected leaders are getting paid under the table by developers for special favors. Y'all, come on. I've talked a little bit about personal property rights in the last video. I'll repeat it again here. If you own a piece of property, or better yet, if you live next to a vacant tract of land, the owner of that tract has certain rights to use that property. Those rights are largely dictated by our zoning code. Do not rely upon a neighbor or a realtor telling you that that property over there can never be developed, because it's almost certainly untrue. Our development standards are rigorous. It is not easy or inexpensive to take a wooded lot and turn it into a subdivision. And if you really believe that someone has done something shady, we'll be happy to show you every single step of the development process. Make an appointment with someone in the planning department and we can walk you through it from the concept day to the day your new neighbors move in. There's just not the opportunity or the need for deception that many of you think is out there. If you've retired and moved here recently, and the majority of your friends that you've made since you've moved here have also retired and moved here recently, it may surprise you to know just how many of the people in our community rely upon new construction for their livelihood. It's not just the builders and the tradesmen like plumbers and electricians and HVAC folks. It's also the insurance companies and their employees, the banks and their employees, the fence contractors, the pool installers, the landscapers, the car dealerships, and yes, even those highly demanded fancy grocery stores. They all rely upon growth of our community to make it.